Hey everybody, welcome to the Retro Bliss Rewind podcast. Usually I'm not the person who has to give these intros. That's usually Retro Bliss himself. Unfortunately, he's got a migraine today, so he won't be with us. But he might be in the chat at some point. We are going to be talking Atari today. We're going to be talking about what they've done, where they've been, where they're going, where we think that they should go. Recently on the Atari Network YouTube channel, there was a video talking about just this thing. And so we've got a special guest with us today, Vinny Funkmaster Vineyard.
Toot, toot, baby. It's time to ride the funk train. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity, baby.
Glad to have you here. And we also have, of course, Brian from BD Retro Mods. So boys, Atari.
It's always fun when we have these Atari conversations.
It's always fun because you know what? The fact of the matter is we are all massive Atari fans.
Yeah.
And I know myself personally, I quite often get flack for being critical sometimes. And I've always been of the mindset of you can be critical of the things that you love. And in fact, that makes the things that you love better. If you don't just kind of blindly say, hey, everything's great, everything's awesome. But they have made a lot of really good moves, I think. And they've made some maybe not so great moves, but so moves. I don't think they made any like outright bad moves. But really, for me, I think the VCS and I have a bad relationship, a really bad relationship. The VCS being their newer one. But I will say that I think Atari really started to take off and become a bigger part of the conversation when they came out with the 2600 plus. And that was all around the same time that they bought Atari Age and they started obviously getting into making not necessarily new games, because as we'll probably talk about, almost all the games that were released were already released in some way, shape, or form prior to that. But they're really kind of getting into that we're making proper Atari games again with this Plus label. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I think there's a definite line between when Wade Rosen took over as CEO of Atari and before. The VCS was an animal that was not his, and he's never really been crazy about it. And just a quick note, my wife owns a transportation company, and one of our customers are three gay guys that live in a shed. And they wear these dog masks. Like if you go to their Facebook pages, it's an insane scene. They're sweet guys, but don't bend over in front of them. But anyway, they when I had I was looking like I take them. They don't have a car, obviously, and I was taking them somewhere, and I was looking at my Atari stuff because I'm addicted to it. And the guy in the back, one of them is deaf, which makes it very hard to talk to the guy. And he was like, oh, the Atari VCS, I want that. And I was kind of like, you maybe want to get a 7800 plus instead. The VCS is terrible to get out of the box. And he couldn't understand me because he's deaf. And he went and got a VCS. And I had to actually get it from him and spend about a week trying to get the thing to work. And the VCS leaves an awful taste in everybody's mouth, unless you're one of these tech guys, which I am not. Some of these tech guys can zip in, zip out. They don't care. They put their own operating systems on it. They run a computer. They run their own companies on the thing. I like the VCS because it's so quirky, and that's probably why I like Atari to begin with. But I do feel that the Atari is starting to pull back from the VCS. There's not been any AAA, if you will, like Yars Rising is a AAA game. There's no AAA games being released for it this year because Fatal Run 2089 doesn't work on the VCS too well because it uses the Unreal Engine. And so we'll have to see. It may just be an indie platform, and it may be kind of just floating around. But there's 186 games on it, or 187 games, and compared to what Atari has done in the past, that makes it, I think, the second most supported platform they ever had. So,
that is true.
I mean, on that,
does it really count? Does it really count if they're all digital though?
Not really, no. Not really.
Right. No, I like when it comes to the VCS, like you said, that was like old leadership, and that was at a time when they were just putting the brand on anything and everything just to get it out there and make some money. And I think at the end of the day, the VCS they just need to let it die. Like, just officially say we're done and call it a day. Because to your point, I mean, it's now what, 4 years old, I think. And again, it does have, like you said, 187 games, but I think 186 of those you can find anywhere else to play. And and I think where people like it, like during the fire sale they had, again on it, that again, when you are technical, there's a lot of cool things you can do with modding it and changing it to be a very, very awesome emulation machine. And I think that's what you're seeing a lot of people use it for now, because I was fortunate enough not to really have issues when I set mine up. But to your point, though, there has been a lot of issues with the
let me talk to that, because mine is still a brick. And this is an experience that a lot of people have. And I've seen people, like, because I'm a part of the VCS Facebook group. I don't comment in there. I just kind of observe. And every time someone's like, oh, I ordered a VCS from the fire sale, it's great and all that. And then they get it. And they're like, what the hell? It won't do the thing. And don't, like, Atari's site doesn't have the BIOS update. You have to find their Discord, find some random guy's YouTube video about how to reboot the BIOS, which is absolutely ridiculous to me. Like, somebody's excited about getting this underpowered PC that, granted, looks sexy. It looks really sexy.
Oh yeah, it does, for sure.
Awesome.
But you now have to get your SD card or USB or whatever and find this BIOS and then do this BIOS update as if it was you got a PC and you had to reformat it. This is absolutely ridiculous. And the fact that you have to go through all these different channels just to find that, most people that I've seen in that Facebook group, and people are like, oh, just go to this Discord, you have to update the BIOS. And they're like, forget it, I'm returning this piece of crap. And I updated the BIOS on mine, and then I was still stuck in an update loop, and I never tried again. It just wasn't worth it to me. And I was kind of excited, not because there's anything really on it that I can't get anywhere else, at least that I'm interested in, but just the quirkiness of playing with that classic joystick. And like I love quirky things, quite like you, Vinny.
Well, it's
the customer service.
Yeah, my only retort to that, to the reason I think it's worthwhile, is because the classic controller used as a paddle can change gameplay elements of some of the recharge games, where you can play Gravatar recharged in a different way, which makes it one of the best games Atari has ever released. If you use it like a thumbstick or like a dual joystick, it's a different game altogether. And it's also, as a 7800 guy, they've started releasing 7800 homebrews on the VCS store for $8.99 or less. And since Atari Age is backed up like an old toilet in a trailer, it's some of the best ways to play, like Artie and Harpy's Curse and some of the stuff that you can't get because they're just, Albert's not getting to them fast enough. So there is some worth to the system, but you have to really educate the masses on, is this something you're going to fight for? And if it's not something you want to fight for, then there's a million other ways to play a million other games,
So what speed limits comments? It's the VCS is not horrible. I never said it was. The boot up bugs was fixed. Yes, but it's not from Atari. Yars Rising is on the VCS. Nobody said otherwise.
Wow.
But the fact of the matter is, I did that BIOS update. I did everything that YouTube video, and it's still a brick for me. And it really comes down to what Ivory Tower Collections is saying, is It really does seem that Atari is happy to let their public be their tech support for their systems, and that includes the Plus consoles.
It's Jesse.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. No, I was gonna say, at the end of the day, with when it comes to my VCS, I'm at a point with it because I've already added an extra drive to it. I've put more RAM in it, and I think I'm just at the end of the day, I'm going to turn it into a Steam OS box, just to be able to get some more use out of it because, like I said, I have it. And again, looks cool, but I struggle with wanting to buy anything on it because what happens when they do? Because it's not if, it's when they do discontinue it. How soon is that store going to get shut down? How am I going to make sure I can still get those games that I purchased for them?
I'm scared of that too. I is
so,
the thing going to work offline?
Yeah. So because of that, I don't have an interest to actually buy stuff on the VCS. And so now at the end of the day, to get my use out of it, I think that's my next step, is just to turn it into a Steam OS box. So
yeah, at some point I will probably try that BIOS update again. Like, as I said, I would like to play it.
It's awesome. It's awesome when you get. I love it.
Yeah,
it's getting to that point. Yes, you have to want it.
Yeah.
It's like losing that chubby gut, getting those abs. It's a lot of work. Is it worth it? We don't know.
We don't know. Okay, so, but that was, the VCS is not why Atari is a little more popular now than it was a couple of years ago. It is that Plus system. Now, the 2600 Plus, when it came out, I thought was a fantastic move. It is not compatible with everything, even after the update, but its compatibility is quite good, and they are supporting it with re-releases of some original games, as well as some homebrew games getting official releases, like the recent Caverns of Mars, and Bentley Bear, and what's the other one?
There's a whole bunch. There's an Asteroid Deluxe,
there's a whole bunch.
Duel, Berserk, Frenzy. Yeah.
And then they followed it up with the 7800 Plus. And the 7800 Plus does make some minor improvements, and it has the updated firmware included, although there's now another update out there.
They pulled that update, though, because I guess it was
did they?
Yeah, you can't.
It was causing issues?
Yeah, you can't even put the update on now. So at least the one that was on Atari Age, that I think was dated December 18th.
Yeah, and it is an update, albeit a modest one. Has the wireless controller. They released the 7800 Euro gamepad. A little lackluster for what I would have wanted, but again, not a bad move. And it seems to have not sold maybe as well as they had hoped, because Brian, you just recently sent to our group that they've marked it down.
Yeah, no, this weekend, I mean, it might still be that price, but when I looked at it Saturday or Sunday, yeah, Amazon had it on sale for $108. So,
wow.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, which if you don't have a Plus system, now's the time to get it, because for $108, it's definitely worth it. Because Bentley Bear that's packed with it's a great game. I mean, but and again, where I think they made the mistake. Well, there's a number of mistakes with the Plus, but I think
they made a mistake with Bentley Bear too. I made a video about it. Not to cut you off, but this is the thing about Atari, that we're talking about quirkiness. So you come out sexy, 7800 Plus, looks like the European version, has the improved European pads that all the Americans have always wanted, because the Pro line controllers were painful. So what do? They're like, I got an idea. We're going to release something that's like Super Mario Brothers. It's going to be like 1986 all over again. We're going to release Crystal Quest, Bentley Bear's Crystal Quest. Hot damn, that's going to make everybody excited. And then the only controller that you can't really play Bentley Bear efficiently is the damn European gamepad, because you have to cord the buttons to make Bentley Bear do the super jumps, and I see all over the place. I can't get past the first damn rock, and I'm like, oh my god! I was like, you got to get some other retro controller or put it in the mode where you can use an Atari 2600 joystick or use the pain line. And it was like, God, they just shot themselves in the foot, because Bentley Bear is one of the best 8-bit games ever, one of the best homebrews ever for the 7800, and they somehow dork that up. So God bless them for that.
Apparently the price of the 7800 Plus is back up to 130. So maybe it was just a temporary sale.
Get rid of some overstock.
But I know certainly the reception is a lot more muted than it was for the 2600 Plus, which is understandable because it's basically the same thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we did a podcast with Silverback on his podcast, the Atari Network podcast last year, and we said the 2600 Plus is a 7800. The 7800 did not sell well, and it doesn't have great marketing because you go back to the first Flashback, they tried to release it as a 7800. Nobody gave a crap because Kurt Vendel was a huge fan, God rest his soul, about the 7800, and he did he thought the 7800 could have been so much more, and he was right, because we've seen the homebrew quality shoot through the roof. However, nobody cares about the 7800 because it's all about nostalgia with Atari anyway. They want the 2600, they want wood grain, they want the joystick they remember. And
2600 is their cash cow.
Yep. Yeah. And so the 7800 is just licking the jar one more time.
Yeah. Well, and the problem with that, though, is the fact, and again, I said this in a podcast when we were talking about the 7800 Plus, is just, most companies, normally have, 3, 5, 10-year business plan. And so when you did the 2600 Plus, you can't tell me you weren't already thinking about this was going to be the next thing. And what should have happened is the 2600. I mean, if you were going to go this route, the 2600 Plus should have just been 2600 games. And then you would have brought out the 7800 Plus, and then it could have done both. And then I think people would have been excited. But when you already have one machine that is, in essence, the same machine, just a different shell, I mean, it's not going to necessarily make people want to go grab it. And that's where I think they made a mistake. On top of the fact that the controllers they put with it, everyone knows, as cool as like, oh, great, a Euro pad. It looks like an NES pad. It's nowhere near an NES pad. It's not a good
It is
pad.
better than the ProLine controller, though.
Anything's better than the ProLine controller. But
I do think they chose the right controller to emulate. And we've talked about this before too. I honestly believe that if they did anything to try to change that controller, there would have been an uproar. Because again, you might not have nostalgia for the 7800. Like I didn't even really know it existed back in the day. I think maybe somebody I knew had one and I never played it. But as a collector, like when I kind of got back into it, I was like, oh man, I need one of those for my 7800. I never got one. And so when I got the 7800 Plus, if it had come with anything other than that, or a standard ProLine controller, like something that wasn't authentic, I would not have been a fan. I know you've talked about in the past, oh, they should make a better 7800 controller. And sure, as an extra thing, but bundled with the system, I do think they made the right call on what controller to put in there.
Well, but also, though, where was the quality control on it? Because Ivory Tower Collections, that's in the chat. I mean, he did a video on it. Like, it's not good. I mean, and it's not necessarily just because of the design, but like there's a big problem if you're pushing right in the direction and yet it's also pushing up and down at the same time. That should not be happening on any controller at all. And I mean, that was, I think, another issue with this release of the 7800 Plus. Where was the quality control? Same with when the 2600 Plus came out. Where was the quality control? Because we had the buttons flipped with the 7800 games. The difficulty switches were flipped. It's just
what? Yeah, I mean, man. They're doing better. Wade Rosen came out and said, we're not going to win the game hitting home runs. We're trying to hit singles. And I think for the last 2 or 3 years, they've done more right than wrong. But man, it's not been flawless.
Yeah.
No.
And like what Speed Limit says, different styles for like. And I talked about this on our 7800 Plus podcast, where for me personally, it doesn't matter. You could release a Vader Plus, you could release a Heavy Sixer Plus, you could release a Junior Plus. Go nuts. But for me, my big issue was that this was released before there's any official update patch for the 2600 Plus. Which, I don't have a problem with them releasing the same thing over and over. I mean, look at all the flashbacks and days of old. Look at all this My Arcade stuff. For all intents and purposes, it's the same package of games, plus minus a few that are released in all these different formats.
They just
it's
throw
low-hanging fruit.
Yeah,
and they're not Atari products; they're Atari licensed products. I can roll my eyes all I want at Atari energy drinks and decanters and stuff like that. I am not the market for that.
Yeah. I honestly have no issue with that though, because again, that's
exactly that's free money for them.
Right.
They license the logo and a couple titles and collect a paycheck. Mm-hmm. That's smart business sense.
And hopefully they take decanter money and they put it into R&D to their own IPs, and hopefully to get more IPs. Like I've been screaming forever. I'd love them to get Battlezone back, and I'd love them to get some of the Atari games releases that's now part of the Midway collection. Some of the stuff they've lost over the years, I'd love for them to bring it back and do the recharge stuff and this thing like they're doing with the Fatal Run 2089. I mean, that's kind of, they're also doing great stuff on all platforms too, like Steam and the Switch and stuff like that. A lot of this stuff, it's not, Haunted House they released 2 years ago is not the quality of Luigi's Mansion, but it's a damn good game, that Haunted House game. It was a really good game.
It never needed to be Luigi's Mansion.
Right. Yeah, but it's so they're doing pretty well, man. They've only had I thought the Food Fight multiplayer game just didn't have enough people wanting to play it for that to hit. But they've done really well with a lot of their decisions, I think. And so hopefully, because I got an email today about Atari football T-shirts. And I'm sitting there well, the Philadelphia Eagle one looks like the New York Jets one. I may buy, and I'm sitting there thinking about buying this crap again. And I'm like, God, they got me again just because it's got a Fuji on the damn thing. I'm part of
That's right.
Yeah.
Brian, I'm going to ask you this
because
I know it's compatible with the 2600.
Yeah, the 2600, if you're just doing, for the one button, it's fine. But now, specifically for the Genesis controller, though, you do need to have a special adapter that Retro HQ, the people who make the 7800 game drive, you do need that to actually get a fully compatible Genesis controller for the 7800.
There you go.
You can get those on Stone Age Gamer, and I'm sure there's a couple other sites, but at least the one locally that I know of is Stone Age Gamer. I think it's $15 for the adapter.
There's one
That's the answer from the Atari guy, or the controller guy.
Ed Ladden has a nice one too, the Seagull 78 adapter, which can work, and that's what I use. I play all my 7800 games with the Genesis controller. So
I do have that Bluetooth speaker hat. I tried it out once because it was part of my package when I got my VCS. So go ahead, Brian.
Oh no, I was just gonna say because kind of on the plus thing, I don't have an issue per se about releasing units, but to the point that Ivory Tower just mentioned is just the problem is that you keep doing that year after year after year after year, it degrades the line. That ultimately people are like, oh great, it's another one of those this year, and then they just lose interest. Where a point that you made on your YouTube channel, Vinny, which I think makes perfect sense. They need to start looking at the Evercade model in the sense of release. You got this console out, but you got to keep bringing stuff out on a fairly regular basis to keep people excited and enticed. I mean, the Evercade model is so perfect in the sense of how to do it right. Our games are $20-$25, and we're going to release 2 games every other month. And I mean, and they got that whole release cycle where it was cool. We had all these re-releases from Atari Age and stuff in a commercial format this time around. but it's like, man, holy crap, this is like 12 games all at once, to try to get. And
despite the fact that at least the regular edition of the games, I think, are priced very well. But when you're buying them in a batch of 10,
right.
it adds up for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, these plus lines of games they've released, I'm so impressed that they're at $29.99. And Atari Age's prices were twice that, and the packaging's pretty good. It comes with an instruction manual. It comes with a little cute little sleeve, like a little koozie for the cartridge. So
I do kind of like the cartridge koozie.
I do.
I have to admit.
They stay warm at night. They don't have to. They're not freezing there next to Miss Pac-Man or whatever. So,
but I mean, that's a good lead on, because like one of the things that I feel need to happen now that we've mentioned it is just I think, with Atari owning Atari Age and knowing the fact that they were able to release all those games on time for $30 with box, manual, everything. I think we need to see more of that. And I mean, I know this might not even be a popular thing to say, but I'm just, Atari owns Atari Age. Does it not make sense to maybe start funneling more of that game production side to Atari core? And so that way we can get games for cheaper. And I think it's a win-win for everyone, because it's cheaper for the consumer, and the developers are going to likely make more because there's going to be more copies sold.
Yeah, and the guys who develop these homebrews are fans. I mean, if you would have told them 5 years ago you're going to be part of Atari's official lineup. I know Bob DeCrescenzo fairly well, who's the guy that makes all, Pac-Man Plus makes all these 7,800 games. It tickled him pink. I mean, almost to the point of tears. He was so happy just to do it. And yeah, he gets a little something on the side, but it's not, he's not going to be able to buy a yacht.
It is. It is modest, but the very fact that you can say, "Hey, I'm an Atari programmer."
That's right. Like, it goes right with
Atari. Yeah.
It goes right with the Caverns of Mars 8-bit.
With John Champeau.
You make a great game, Atari will pick it up if it stays in line with what they think's a good game for them.
And I will say, and very much to Atari's credit, I criticize Atari, but very much to their credit, their approach to the homebrew community has been excellent. Mm-hmm. They have not gone after anybody. They have not, and there are people out there selling games that are unlicensed ports of other people's games. As long as it's not Atari, they're not going to say anything. You do you, and if you get an NDA, you get an NDA. Right. They have not sent any of those out, obviously, but they have been working with them. Now, it may be a pittance that they pay them for them to use them, but they're not going in there being heavy-handed, which they could be, because they do own the licenses for some of these titles. Mm-hmm. And that, very much to their credit, I think the homebrew community has actually a pretty positive view of Atari because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for 20 years I ran this website, and it was all about homebrews, because everybody was sick of the, everybody knew the 58 games for the 7,800. So, and the thing that I think is excellent is if you look at the homebrew libraries of the Atari machines, the 2600 and the 7800 are by far the best and most consistent. The 5200 is almost non-existent. The Lynx is really rare, and the Jaguar games seem to be, there's some good ones in there, don't get me wrong, but there seems to be a lot of weird old computer ports. Like, are you really excited to play the Chaos Engine again, and pay $70 for it? So, and nothing against those guys that program that stuff, but it seems like we've already got, and people are already in this chat talking about Atari needs to release the 5200 Plus and the Jaguar Plus. There's problems with those being released in that format. The 5200 is going to have a problem because the 5200 library, Atari owns very little of that library. It's all licensed stuff, and there wasn't a lot of games to begin with, and there's not a lot of homebrews to save it. And the 5200 got dorky controllers, and they've got the controllers that are kind of hard to replicate, and the Jaguar is still in its infancy with the emulation. So I think we're off a few years or two before we see that again. We may be surprised, but I would think that the Jaguar is more approachable than the 5200 Plus. I do too.
Mostly because of the controller, but also I firmly believe that if they come out with a Jaguar Plus, it has to have an SD card slot. Original Jaguar games are so expensive now. Like I collected the vast majority of my collection like 20 years ago when it was dirt cheap. Nowadays, I couldn't, for what I paid for my entire collection, I couldn't get a system. So I really think that they need to adapt that micro SD card or regular SD card or whatever.
Well, I mean, again, I think that, and again, I don't know everything they have, but the thing is with the Jaguar, which is why I think that one's more real. Because I agree with you, Vinny. Like, as much as I like the 5200, it's not gonna. It's most likely not going to happen because Atari of 2025 doesn't own many of those titles. Like, it's such a small library for them.
Their best games, not to cut you off, I'm sorry, but their best games on a system are not Atari games, like Space Dungeon and Gremlins and stuff, the Dreadnought Factor.
Right, exactly. And yes, there are some homebrews for 5200, but I don't know that there's a big enough library of homebrews that would be able to make that work. But like you saw with the 7800 and 2600. But now the Jaguar, it has a good community of homebrew folks. And
as is mentioned here, they could re-release carts, but again, I don't think they have the rights to many of those games.
That's right.
I think
not the good ones.
I think they might have more than we think. Now, I mean, obviously, they wouldn't be able to do Aliens versus Predator without getting a new license, getting an updated license or something. But I think a lot of the games were owned by Atari at the time.
They were.
So
I don't think they are anymore, but
I'm not sure.
I've got a question. I've always, and maybe you guys know this. This is just, we're taking a total break, and I'm an asshole, and I'm sorry about this.
All right.
But Theme Park was released for the Jaguar. Mm-hmm. Is that affiliated with Roller Coaster Tycoon? Was like the beginning, or is that just two totally different franchises?
I always thought that they were associated because like even the font is similar, and I always thought that it was like the same thing and just named something different for the Jaguar, but I could be completely off on that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm trying to do
I appreciate that. Thank you. Put a screeching halt to this rapid fire podcast with a stupid idea that it always bothers me too, because I'm like, is Roller Coaster Tycoon and Theme Park the same thing? I don't know.
Well, while Brian checks it out.
No, they were. I was just going to say, it looks like they were developed by different companies.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Yep.
So Retro Bliss mentions, and this is something that I'm big in the Intellivision community. Mm-hmm. And the thing is that Atari does, and somebody else mentioned it here as well, Atari does own a decent amount of the Intellivision library. Again, Intellivision's one of those systems where the majority of the best games for it weren't Intellivision games. There was definitely a few, but like Burger Time isn't Intellivision. But the question for me has always been, is there a big enough community behind Intellivision to support the release of an Intellivision Plus like there is with a 2600 Plus? What do you guys think?
What if they did something, and this would be sexy as hell. What if they did something with Amico? They re-released like the Amico line that was supposed to come out.
Oh, that would not be good at all.
You know what, Vinny, you're a guest on this podcast, but you're out. I have to say, on behalf of the Intellivision community, we are glad to not be associated with Amico anymore. And I don't think Atari should be releasing any Amico games. That is my personal opinion.
So to answer your question, though, I think there's some validity for it. And the thing is, like, yes, like, obviously.
Thank you. Wait, sorry. Yes, it drives me nuts when people say Jaguar. It's Jaguar. Or if you want to be a Brit, it's a Jaguar. But Jaguar, just Jaguar.
What do I say? No. I gotta.
You say Jaguar. I let it fly from you.
I'm from
'Cause you're a guest.
Baltimore. I got a crazy act. I got a weird. Like I lived in Tennessee, New York. I played music with a bunch of black music. Everything coming out of my mouth is just all sorts of quirky, weird ways
That's
to pronounce
okay.
things.
I tease these guys because a lot of Americans I know say Jaguar.
Well, I'm an actor too, and I was doing a TV show. It was one of these crime TV shows, and I was doing my lines, and the director came up, and he was a real nice guy, and he goes, "You're doing an accent, and is there any way you can not do the accent?" And I was like, "This is the way I talk," and he was like, "Oh, then never mind. If that's how you talk, then I thought you were trying to sound like something." And I was like, "No, this is crap that comes out of my mouth."
So Ivory Tower, they own the Intellivision IP of games, but they also own the Intellivision IP. So I do believe that includes the GROM file, the exec file. So they could do an emulation box, as far as I know.
But no, I think where I was starting to go there was that I think it would be smart to bring it out. Like, even though that, yes, there's a bigger fan base for Atari, I think this is a good opportunity to get people into Intellivision and to see what's there.
Hopefully.
And especially if they can partner with maybe some of the bigger homebrew developers of Intellivision.
I know for a fact that provided you can get JLP support, which most modern homebrews utilize JLP, and it is possible even on an emulation box, that there is at least one. Like, I know Electronite, and I would consider the gold standard of Intellivision homebrew. They're great. They would love to work with Atari. And they would love to share any knowledge that they could to help make an emulation box possible, for the very reason that it means they probably would sell some more homebrews.
I was going to save this. I thought you guys had me on, but I do think the Intellivision Plus is in the future of Atari. That was something that we were talking about on the last podcast. We were talking about. I was like, that's the sexy pick, because last year, you look at what Atari did. We had a year-end awards thing that nobody gave a crap about, not even us, but we gave out these awards to these categories. And the biggest surprise of the year really was the 8-bit mini. That came out, the Atari 8-bit mini came out of nowhere. Nobody saw that coming. And that's the cool thing about Atari right now, is you have no idea what is coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Intellivision Plus, I think, would be ingenious and also probably expected, because they haven't done anything with them. They just released one in the VCS store. They've released one Intellivision game, which was the Atari version of Dungeon Stalker, Night Stalker. They really, and that's all they've done really with the VCS.
Well, on the end network games, I guess,
with the plus
the compilation thing. Yeah.
I don't know if this helped my mic. I made an adjustment there because I saw someone said my mic was quiet. Yeah. But no, I think it's smart, because the reality is, coming into 2025, it has to be a new console. Like, I just don't feel it can be another rehash. So either give us an Intellivision or give us a Jag, one or the other.
And here's my thought: is if it's going to take a little more time to do that, come October, November, just release a few more really good homebrews, like stuff that people really, and just get through that season. Like, you don't have to release a console this year if it's not going to be ready.
Right.
Because Atari's biggest problem has been twofold. It's been quality assurance, and it's been customer service. And so those two need to be right. They're getting a reputation for, hey, all these cool products, but you have to wait super long for it. Or it comes and then it needs to be updated right away. Or it has, so if they could get that kind of sorted and just no nonsense, clear that kind of palette, and then start releasing stuff that is blowing everybody away. Like, I know, at least for the Intellivision community, an Intellivision Plus would be a huge win. Casey himself would buy 10 of them. Casey the
Casey
Intellivision.
I looked to buy stock in Atari at that point. So
Casey's gold.
That's
Well,
right.
Terrible joke.
No, I would like to
Here's-
see.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Brian, and then we'll move on to this.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say because again, the old hardware is aging. Like it's not getting any younger.
Yeah, man.
So I mean,
man.
these Intellivisions are going to be breaking just as much as our old Ataris, and
they already are.
And they already are, and that's why it's important to get modern recreations of these consoles so we can still appreciate and enjoy, the software that was available for them. So
and that is a big part of why I appreciate the 2600 plus, and I do appreciate the 7800 plus. Don't get me wrong, I may be critical about the environment in which it's released, but I have no problem with the system. Talking about this here, FPGA, we've talked to FPGA on the channel a few times, and I think that the only way a second gen FPGA works is if it is a combo system, meaning that you'd have like a 7800 slot that also plays 2600 games. You have a ColecoVision slot. You have an Intellivision slot. Hey, if you're being really ambitious, you have an Odyssey 2 slot. If you can combine those, then that helps justify the cost of an FPGA, which is going to be, FPGAs are prosumer. There's not so much you pick them up at Walmart and or Best Buy or whatever.
No, I fully agree. If they're going to go, FPGA, it has to be a multi-console thing, kind of like how the analog pocket went. I mean, I think that's the only way it can be a successful endeavor for what they're going to have to charge for a price. But then you're also going to have a community backing it, because that's kind of like what you have with the analog pocket now. Like Analog did those initial FPGA cores, but they purposely had another core in there for folks, for the indie community, to literally make their own, things for it. And like
you got to side load the thing, and then you've got everything.
Right. So I mean, if they go that route, I mean, again, for all of us diehard fans that are watching, we would love to have an FPGA console. I just think in the bigger business sense for consumers, I don't know that it's fully necessary, especially when you talk some of this older stuff. Now, again, I want to be able to use flash carts, just like probably everyone here would love to use flash carts. And probably the only way we can do that is having a non-emulation system.
Yeah,
but the reality is, though, I mean, what is that sweet spot that, the Joe Blow consumer is going to be willing to spend? Because obviously Atari's in it to make money. They can't lose money. So, I would love to see it. I just don't know how realistic it is for these older consoles. I think, because like we even saw with the Chameleon, right? I'm sorry, not the Chameleon. That was horrible. The Phoenix. Yeah, the Phoenix. It just costs so much, and at the end of the day, they're not making another run.
Now, highly desirable, but highly desirable to a much smaller market.
Yes. So,
yeah, this Atari run is like a 10% placating us and 90% trying to get all the old heads to be like, oh, I remember this. It's an Atari in a box.
They want the broadest appeal possible.
Yeah.
Right.
And, conflating this with an issue is just how crappy the PS5 and the Nintendo Switch, their lineup for the last year and maybe even 2 years, their lineups haven't been great because these AAA development houses it takes so much money to create a game that's going to be better than the last one. And so this is the time for retro gaming to kind of strike, and these indie developers too, to where people can get, because there's not a lot of, I mean, the game that won Game of the Year this year was a freaking poker game, that wasn't even online. It's just we've really went backward in far as the modern stuff. So this is the time to strike, and they're doing a good job, I think. So,
but with that, I guess going into like the future for it, because to your point, I mean, like it's good to keep re-releasing, these old things for us, and but also we got to kind of look at the future for because none of us are getting any younger either. So, you know, if Atari really wants to keep going, they also need to grab a younger audience as well. And with that, I think, you know, I think they're on the right path a little bit. I think they might need to ramp it up a little bit because, like you've mentioned, like Haunted House for the price of the game, it's not a bad game. You know, you had what, Days of Doom. Again, for the price of it, it's not a bad game. And Yars Rising, I wish they didn't call it Yars, but it's not a bad game. You know, if you go in open-minded, it's not a bad game. And
my problem with that one was that the Yars name, and I was like, there's so much that you could have done with the Yars brand, and this should not have been it.
The Quamp 2 was good, or however you pronounce that. I can't say Jaguar, but maybe that's Quamp or Quamp.
That's why I just called it the Jag.
And also our game of the year over at the Atari Network was Lunar Lander Beyond. That game came out of nowhere. I was like, Lunar Lander, who gives a flip? And it's not a recharge game. And then it had this anime, and I don't like anime. It's the least black thing about me. And then bada boom, besides the skin color, but then bada boom, bada bing. We played it, and it was like, dude, what game has ever been released where you're flying a spaceship that doesn't have a weapon on it? And it's this great story about the solar system blowing up, and you're like this peaceful ship. It was a great idea. And so, yeah, they've came up with some really good ideas, I think. And I think that's how they get, you know, Fatal Run. So Fatal Run wasn't the greatest game of all time, but the graphics of this new Fatal Run, the 2089, looks really cool. It got me kind of like, woo, because I loved Fatal Run, even though it was a crap game. So that's, I think, how they're hooking the kids, if you want to call them kids, the 30-year-old, the millennials, and say, hey, you should check out, you know, I hope they do something with Desert Falcon. I hope there's a whole bunch, Alien Brigade, Midnight Mutants, if they could figure out the licensing with that. There's so many cool little IPs. Planet Smashers, they did a really good update on Planet Smashers. Man. There's so many of those. There's games that they had good ideas for back in the day, like Jinx, that were terrible games that you could go back with those ideas and create really cool new games. So anyway,
but yeah, and then to the point someone mentioned in there too, though, is, you know, I think it's important to focus on new stuff, and I think not just with just software, but even like some hardware stuff to a point, such as controllers and things, because I don't see anything wrong with trying to make more modernized controllers for like the 7800 plus, or again, like some of the people, because I see they mentioned the you know, My Arcade stuff. You know, you got a lot of people excited about they're making a controller with the trackball in it and paddle in it, you know, and if they would do things like that, in addition to the new games, I think that would help as well. Now, you know, someone mentioned about the Polymega. I'm not even going to go there. That's a ridiculously priced console for what it is. I mean,
we could talk about the Gamestation Go.
Yes, I mean, because
I'm worried about that, even though I think it looks cool. I'm worried about the ergodynamic. Did I pronounce that? It's like ergonomic. I saw the guy. Yeah, the ergonomic. I saw the guy trying to play like a trackball game. He had to tilt it weird, and I was like, boy, that's going to be weird on our old carpal tunnel gnarled hands.
My view of, and it's my same view of the GameStation Pro, is you try to do everything and you end up doing it all mediocre. You know, it's got a trackball. It's a tiny little ball that you move your thumb over. It's not a trackball, right? It's got a spinner. Yeah, it's a spinner, but it's a little like
somebody lambasted me too. It's not a spinner, it's a paddle. I didn't even know there's a difference, but yes, there technically is, because the spinner you can sit there and go wee, and a paddle you cannot.
Right. So it's a paddle, but still, like, even if it had Kaboom on it, okay, which it doesn't, but you could probably sideload games and whatnot. I'm not playing Kaboom like this. I'm playing Kaboom like this. That's
right.
And granted, it's not for me. That doesn't mean it's not for other people. But for the price, Albo agrees. $150 for that is too much.
Yeah, it may be too
opinion.
big too. Like it seems like it would be. You need a backpack to carry that thing around.
Well, I mean, it's definitely not something to just throw in your pocket. I mean, they're going. Yeah. It's going like Steam Deck, Switch OLED sized console, and
it's definitely going to be something that some people love.
Yes,
I don't have a problem with it. It's just not for me.
But I guess where my problem with it, I don't know if it would call it a problem. It's just, I think moving in the future also, though, this is where I understand, Atari license to try to get some extra revenue. But there comes a point where you got to say, again, how bad does this start to degrade my line? When I'm trying to do all this other stuff, does it really make sense to license myself out to companies like My Arcade and things like that to make these type of devices that may or may not put a bad taste in someone's mouth, which then they saw the Atari logo and here's another crap thing from Atari. You know what I mean? And again, I'm not saying it's going to be crap, but
you are articulating a point that I've tried to say, and you said it in such a way I think people need to sit there. So, and we need to study what you just said. Releasing Centipede over and over again without a trackball is denigrating the game of Centipede. It's not how it's supposed to be played. It don't quite play right. So when people go back and scratch this itch, this nostalgia itch, you're like, this kind of feels weird. Same thing with Crystal Castles. Crystal Castles is one of the best games of all time. You play it with a joystick, it's garbage. And they release it on the Super Mega Pocket thing with the little D-pad. You can't play. So same thing with Major Havoc, same thing with Breakout, same thing with Tempest. So when you go into this stuff, Millipede, the whole bit, you're constantly reinforcing that these games aren't as great as they were because you're not actually, they're emulation, which is a little off anyway, but then you're also controlling it with something that wasn't designed for. And so, yeah, I think that's a great point. And again, you're going to get even now with this Gamestation Go, a marble to control Centipede and a tiny little button to control Tempest is not the same thing as and it scratches an itch and it's better than a joystick probably, but again, it's not. It can have an adverse effect, like you just beautifully articulated, man. Brian, you did a good job on that. I've been trying to find the words to say that. It's like, quit releasing this shit the way it is. Like, you can't play these games because it denigrates the experience.
Right. One of the things, it's quite like all the different flashbacks. And my dad bought one of the flashbacks. So my dad was like an Atari guy since 77, like when it first came. And that's where I got it. Like, I played on my dad's Atari system when I was a little kid. And, the best games are Activision and Magic. They're not the Atari branded games, but these flashbacks, my dad's like, oh yeah, I can't wait to play Frostbite or this or that. Mm-hmm. And it's a collection of Atari games that just, like, they're okay. It's Atari. Some of the Atari games are great, but it's not the games that you really want. And so you get the flashback. You're like, oh, yeah, okay. 2600 wasn't as good as I remember.
And they always, to me, it'd be like, you know what? Nobody needs to play like Street Racer. Let's not include that. It's something we own. It's not, nobody's going to be like,
I got crap for giving Street Racer a 5 out of 10 in my mini review on Sunday.
You reviewed Street Racer on Sunday? Wow,
I do mini reviews. I've got about 170 of them right now of all different original 2600 games, and I gave like Night Driver 4 out of 10. I gave Street Racer 5 out of 10, and I have people like that.
Yeah, man, Night Driver. I'll tell you something. I do a series of videos called the Top 100 Atari games, and my partner I did it with insisted that Night Driver is in the top 100 games. But I was like, okay, I'll let you have that one. But yeah, I agree. Night Driver to me wasn't the. But I guess the guy I do the show with is actually controlling this podcast, and he cut his throat there.
It looks like he's coming back. But
hey,
you hear me?
Yes, you can't see you, but we hear you.
Can't see you, but we hear you.
Okay, so I gotta go to this camera here. There we go.
There we go.
I banged the table and it disconnected my wire, I guess.
Night Driver stocks. Boom.
9. But yeah, it's one of those things where like people's nostalgia they get upset.
Oh,
if I say it's like, because I'm giving them 2025, 2024
I do that
scores.
too. I do that too.
Yeah.
Like Hero sucks, and people go, "What?" And it's just like,
Well, okay, Hero doesn't suck.
Have you played Artie on the 7800?
Well, I mean, if you compare it to Artie,
something new is better. I do love Artie.
Yes.
Just because something new is better doesn't mean something older is bad. The one thing that I will give you with Hero is I hate how you drop dynamite because I always blow myself up.
I just thought it was a little overrated.
I will give you that it's overrated. Same with Pitfall, although I've got a guy who would lynch me.
I think Pitfall is, but you got to understand what Pitfall was at the time.
Oh, I totally do.
But
which is why I gave it a 7.
Like playing Pitfall now is not great. Pitfall 2 is great, but Pitfall 1,
I gave Pitfall 2 a 9.
Yeah, Pitfall 2 is much better than Pitfall. And if you've played the new like Circus Convoy, Casey's Gold. Casey's Gold is so good. It takes all that and makes it just unbelievable. It took me 45 minutes to beat level 2. You're like a one-button game. How can it be so difficult and clever? And the stupid thing, I was like, oh my God, I'm an idiot. But like it took me, I was sitting there going, this game's impossible. But anyway, it's a great game.
Yeah, Joel, if Atari wants to give me a call, I have no problems with coming up with some designs for them for stuff. Because, again, I just don't. I mean, obviously, you know what I make, but I don't have the production power to go make special moldings and things like that. But hey, if Atari wants to give me a call, I mean, I have no problems giving them some pointers there. So.
I can't wait to try your products, but another person, I don't know if he's being serious or not, saying a 2600 Pac-Man needs to be released on a compilation.
Well, this is a running joke. This is a running joke.
All right.
Retro Bliss.
But I was going to say.
Absolutely abhors
well, he should.
2600 Pac-Man.
But did you see?
I maintain it is a terrible port, not a terrible game. But
why? I wonder why they went with blue and orange.
I can tell you why. So back then, Atari had a very, I don't want to say strict, but they had a policy that black backgrounds could only be used for space games. So
this has never been officially confirmed because there are non-space games with black backgrounds. It may have been an individual exec that gave that. But Todd Fry has specifically said that. But it has never been proven that it was an actual policy, but that is.
Do you know the game would have looked if it was blue on black? It would have
looked okay.
It would have looked okay. It looks like the Florida Gators designed it or something. But I was going to tell this guy if he really was a mark for the 2600 Pac-Man that it's being released on the Gamestation Go. Can you believe that?
Yes. That's the joke here.
Okay. All right. So
I think that's great. I will admit, Pac-Man 2600 was my introduction to Pac-Man. I played that before I played the arcade. So I've got nostalgia for it. I know it's not a great port. It's compared to the original. Obviously, you're going to be disappointed, but I don't think Todd Fry owes Bliss any money.
They gave him an eyeball. What is that?
Yeah, well, he's got to see.
He uses sense of smell.
He needs to really see because the ghosts are flickering so much he might miss them.
That's true. He needs to eat his carrots before he plays that game.
All right, guys, we are just about at the end of the podcast here. We got Phil going in the comments. That said, kind of final thoughts. Where do you if you were to give Atari today a rating, what would you give it, and what would you like to see most this year from Atari?
I would give Atari, since Wade Rosen's taken it over, I would give it a B plus probably. It's actually surpassed what I thought they would do. Some of the stuff is ridiculous. Like a coffee bean release on their website with a coffee bean VCS indie game tie-in. But that's the fun stuff about Atari that you're not going to see in a lot of different places. I do know I have the Inside Iggy, There is a 7800 game being developed for the Plus line as we speak. I know who's doing it. I'm excited to say that probably lends to the fact they're going to release more 7800 Plus games at the end of the next year for Christmas time. So, Mike, that's going to be good news. And I don't know all of them. I don't know what it is. I just know, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, so-and-so is working on this for Atari. And I was like, hell yeah. So, yeah, man, I would give Atari, flying colors at this point, because you can't compete with Nintendo. You can't compete with Steam. You can't compete.
No, you got to compete in a completely different lane,
right?
And it's a curiosity. It's a quirky thing, and they're staying in their lane, and I think they're doing a great job. More recharge games. That's your best stuff, and we need more of those.
Brian?
Yeah, I would probably say I'm probably at about a B- with them. And the thing is, like, I think they're on the right path, but I think to what Braylon kind of just said there, there's definitely things they got to fix. And if they start fixing those things, they can easily get to an A. I mean, because at the end of the day, you got to have some better quality control on some stuff for sure. Not just release these consoles and then expect the community to fix them. And I mean, you got to do some more testing. I mean, but then also, I think if they shore up some things, because again, not saying that my arcade device is going to be bad, but I think they need to focus on their own stuff, like quit licensing that stuff out and focus. And with that, go with new stuff. Have it be hardware and software. I think it's very important. I mean, like to Vinny's point, the recharge line, most of the, not all of them, but most of them are good. And I think if you keep going that path, I think you can get to an A there. But I think you just got to shore some things up. Make sure the XP line never comes back. Just different things with that. I think if they can shore those things up, I think it can easily be an A, because they're not going to compete against Sony. They're not going to compete against Nintendo, and they shouldn't. I mean, they need to run their own course, but it just has to be just a little tweaked, yeah. But they're definitely better than what it's been.
This just an interjection on what he says, and I'll shoot you over. The recharge games, like if you had a VCS up and running, that's kind of like considered the world championships of those games, like the best scores are on the VCS. So that's another reason to get the VCS for the recharge games high score table, which is awesome. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, so I'd say I'm between a C plus and a B for sure. I think I'm in the same range as you guys. I think their biggest issues right now are that customer service and quality control. I don't have a problem with any of the products that they put out. I do think that they need to have, like I said, better customer service. If you pick up a 2600 plus or a 7800 plus and you want to update the firmware, you should be able to get that from their site. I would love to see, they own Digital Eclipse, and Digital Eclipse was making that Night Stalker game for the Amico. You can make that game. You don't associate with Amico, but you make that a game. You put it on the VCS, you can put it on the Switch, you can put on whatever. That game looked awesome. And even people who were talking, right from the beginning, who didn't like the idea of the Amico, thought that game looked awesome. And so that needs to happen.
Hell yeah.
But I absolutely think they should explore their Intellivision properties. I don't know if we get a console at the end of this year. If it was, I would say it would probably be an Intellivision Plus or maybe a Jaguar Plus. I don't think it's going to be a 5200 Plus.
No, I don't either.
But I would like to see them really strengthen their 2600 and 7800 offerings. Not so much these re-releases of existing games that are already pretty cheap, but rather, some of the better homebrew games that aren't currently available anymore.
Well, like I said, they need to lean more. Yeah, they need to lean more on the Atari Age catalog, like they did.
There's some great things in that, man. Harpy's Curse last year.
Yeah.
If you guys have played that, it's amazing, man. It's an amazing game.
Well, like I said, Harpy's Curse, Artie. I mean, there's a ton of them that like
Night
there's
Guy
lots.
and Another World and stuff. I mean, there's some great
yeah.
7800.
That I mean, if they could get those under the actual Atari brand for like $30 and get it out to the masses, I mean, I think those would be some huge hits. And and again, it's just and Play On, who pretty much handles all that, has shown multiple times now they can make it happen. You know, they have met their deadlines. You know, it's not like what we saw with the XP line of stuff that buy it and a year later you might get a cartridge that's but we're not even gonna, that's a whole rant in itself. But
Braylon, that is true in some cases, but there are some fantastic, like I would like to see, you couldn't call it Tron's Deadly Discs anymore, but a Deadly Discs recharged would be awesome. Like I said, the Night Stalker, there are definitely a few, Cloudy Mountain. There's some great games.
Bob DeCrescenzo told me in secret he's working on an Adventure 3 game that takes Adventure and Cloudy Mountain and combines them. I would love to see that for the 7800.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
And I agree, Ivory. Like I said, they really need to focus on new stuff. And like I said, I think if they can, I mean, they're already with the homebrew community on stuff, when it comes to getting the Atari Pluses updated and again, getting these games released. I think there's no reason they can't like contact some of these folks that we know and love to make new stuff for the consoles.
Cool beans. Oh, look who we have.
Look at that guy. Nice hat.
Thanks.
How's your head doing?
Actually didn't expect for Mike to get me on. I was going to hope that he just got me in at the end of the green room.
Thanks for dressing up.
That's okay. I'm in my wife beater right now. And I didn't have my background set or anything. But
this way you can officially say that you have been on all of your own podcasts.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. Thank you, Vinny, for coming on, man. I've really enjoyed listening. I wish I could have participated a little bit more, but I don't know, man. I don't even want to speculate. You guys got to go. It's been an hour.
All right.
Anyway,
I'm gonna
thank you so much.
end it and we can chat in the green room.
Yeah, I'm very sorry I couldn't be.
Oh, it's all good.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Yay, we got Retro Bliss on for even just a little bit. But, we'll see you next week, guys. Bye.
Yep.